Now call this Bryan Independent School District meeting to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 6 p.m. Welcome to everyone who's here this evening. If you don't mind, please turn off the sound on your phones, and we'll get started with our pledges this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. We will open the meeting with public comment on agenda items. Citizens may make comments about topics relevant to district business. Topics should be limited to 3 minutes. Comments concerning specific student or personnel will be heard in closed session. I believe we do not have any comments this evening. So we'll move to item number 5. I now recess this regular meeting of the Bryan Independent School District. The time is 6:02 p.m. I now call this public hearing of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 6:02 p.m. The purpose of this public hearing is to present the budget and proposed tax rate. And we will have Chief Financial Officer Norma Friddle here to talk about our budget and proposed tax rate.
Good evening, Mr. President, board member, Superintendent Carabine. Tonight we are coming back to the community for a second public hearing because our proposed tax rate has changed from what was previously presented. The primary change is the addition of 2 M&O pennies that, if called by the board tonight, would ultimately require voter approval through a voter approval tax rate election. Tonight's hearing is focused solely on the proposed tax rate. The budget presented and adopted by our board has not changed. The only change is the addition of 2 M&O pennies, which we will explain in greater detail in just a moment. As we move into tonight's discussion, I want to briefly ground us in the goals that guide our budget discussions. Our resources must first support high-quality instruction and the programs our students need. Recruiting and retaining a strong workforce is essential to that work. We must also maintain a healthy fund balance so our commitments remain sustainable over time. And of course, safety and security are embedded in every decision that we make. And here we can see the proposed maintenance and operations budget presented at our first public hearing. Nothing has changed on the budget side, and we previously reviewed those changes in detail. Tonight we are simply providing the budget again for reference, as our primary focus is the proposed tax rate. As a reminder, the 25-26 projected actuals are still only estimates at this point, and they are not audited numbers. And these may change as we continue posting year-end entries to close out the fiscal year. And our debt service budget also remains focused, the debt service budget remains focused on meeting the district's existing debt obligations. We continue to manage this fund carefully to support our long-term commitments while maintaining stability for our taxpayers. Again, there are no changes to this budget from what was previously presented. Now, this slide actually summarizes why we are back in the boardroom tonight. A common misconception is that school districts can simply raise taxes each year without voter approval. That is not the case, and tonight's process demonstrates the transparency and the voter involvement required. A school district's total tax rate is made up of 2 separate rates, each serving a different purpose. The maintenance and operations rate funds the district's day-to-day operations, while the debt service rate is set at the level needed to repay voter-approved bonds. The maintenance and operations rate is further divided into two tiers. The first is the maximum compressed rate, which is set by the state and is mainly driven by Bryan ISD's property value growth. The second is the enrichment portion. This gives local voters the opportunity to approve additional operating funds beyond the state's basic funding level, allowing the district to invest more in local priorities. Tonight's proposal affects only the enrichment portion of the tax rate. These 2 additional cents are known as golden pennies. They generate both local tax collections and additional state funding, and all of the revenue stays with the district. It is not subject to recapture. With golden pennies, every dollar stays in Bryan ISD. Nothing is sent back to the state, allowing us to invest the full amount in our students and our staff. To conclude, there is no proposed change to the debt service portion of the tax rate. When voters approved the district's most recent bond, we committed to keeping this rate at 27 cents. We are honoring that commitment, and the debt service rate will remain unchanged. And finally, we are required to present the taxpayer impact statement, which compares the current year to the proposed tax year and summarizes the median homestead value, the proposed tax rate, and the estimated tax bill for the average homeowner. The median homestead value shown here includes the applicable homestead exemption of $140,000. This is a new requirement under Texas Government Code 551.043, and tonight's presentation ensures the district remains in compliance. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Norma, I got just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Let's see if I can find the slide. So just to reiterate, of the M&O portion of the taxes, Tier 1, the district does not vote on or set. That is state-driven, correct?
That is correct, sir. That is state set and driven by local Bryan ISD property value growth.
Okay. So the only one that we really, I guess, 2 that the board or the community can vote on is Tier 2, the enrichment, and then the debt service rate. Is that correct?
Correct, yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There being no further business, the public hearing adjourned at 6:08 PM. I now reconvene this regular meeting of the Bryan Independent School District. The time is 6:08 PM. We'll start with our first action item, 6A, to consider the approval of the parameters order authorizing the issuance and sale of the district's school building bonds. Chief Financial Officer, Mrs. Norma Friddle, Mr. Stephen Adams with Specialized Public Finance will be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am very excited to stand before you this evening as we begin the first financing phase of our most recent community-approved bond program. Our first action item is a consideration of a parameters order authorizing the issuance and sale of approximately $190 million in school building bonds. Mr. Adams, our district's financial advisor, will provide an overview of the bond program, including the sale process and the financing timeline before us. Tonight represents an important step toward delivering the projects our community entrusted us to complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Bob Duransfield. He's the bond counsel that drafts all the legal documents. He's with Norton Rose Fulbright. I also have handouts if anybody would like a handout of this. So to start out, we're actually taking the legal action to sell these bonds. We have to take this legal action before you set your tax rate to get it in the levy. We are taking bids on the bonds next week. So we have certain parameters that we have to meet, which I'll go through in a moment, for us to be able to sell these bonds. And these parameters are included in this bond order, and it authorizes the superintendent and the chief financial officer to sign the documents after we get to bids in those two positions. This first slide is a little bit of review. $397 million in bonds passed in 2025. And then just to show you that, again, we talked about the 27-cent tax rate during the hearing. I would like to point out one thing about that. We do believe we can hit that. However, that rate can go to an unlimited rate to repay the bond, so it can't be voted down to 27 cents. All the voters vote on are at the actual bond amount, so a little bit different than your question a while ago. Just wanted to point that out. We ran all these numbers. We have to make a number of assumptions. One thing we had is a growth rate of 1%. Now, when we got that 1% this year, we were a little surprised that it was that small, so we worked with Norma quite a bit, and she worked with the appraisal district. And what we were told was that the reason it grew so much slower this year was because there's a one-year look back on the mineral values, and those mineral values were on this year's values when gas prices and oil prices were a lot lower. So we expect that in the future, your assessed valuation is going to continue to grow like it has in the past. We also had to go through a rating process. We had a phone interview with myself, Superintendent Carabine, and Norma, and we did a great job. I'd like to say that the rating agencies kept the same rating that we have, AA-, but they specifically pointed out, I mean, if you recall over the last couple of years, this board and the district has really turned around its operating budget and taken a lot of steps that impacted a lot of districts after the COVID shutdown. And so a lot of things have gotten back on track. We've gotten to a balanced budget. The district did a lot of things with its expenses and controlling them. And I think that was noted by the rating agency. So just wanted to point that out. And in my view, your district is in good hands right now. It's being, at least financially, it's being run very well by Ms. Brittle, and the superintendent did a great job. She knew a lot about the community. I didn't realize she was so involved in a lot of the economic development around here, but she was very helpful on the call as well, knowing not only about the district, but about the community. Also, the district gets Asahi payments were additional state aid for homestead exemption. That's a little bit of a guess for us to know exactly what that number is going to be, so we cut that down 10%. We do have some cushion in what we ran for our numbers in bond pricing, bond interest rates as well, 25 basis points for the first bonds, and then 50 basis points or 0.5% thereafter. This page is just showing what projects are going to be financed with this bond. It's basically phases 1 and 2. It's the $190.1 million. We chose these amounts because we have to spend these bond proceeds within 3 years to comply with federal tax law. So we made sure we touched base with all of the architects and district staff that will be responsible for building these buildings. And when we originally had the bond election package numbers, we had a lot larger bond issue than what we have now. And the reason for that is we do have to spend these bond proceeds. And the amount we had, we didn't feel like we could get them spent within that 3-year period, which creates problems with the Internal Revenue Service that we just don't want. So right now, we're looking at selling $90 million next year, $66 million in 2029, and the remaining $50 million in 2031. All of this is subject to change based on the spend down of the projects. So if we can't get this money spent, we're not going to sell as much next year, or we may skip a year, or if we're spending faster, we may sell more than $90 million. We don't want you to run out of cash. So we'll be evaluating that every year through the entire bond program. Regardless of the spend, we we feel comfortable we can meet the 27 cents because of the district growth that we expect to continue. I talked about the parameters. These are the parameters we have to meet. We can't sell more than 200 million par amount of bonds. Now that par changes based upon couponing of the winning bids. So for example, if the interest yield is 4.5% and they bid a coupon rate of 4%, we have to sell a larger par amount. What we expect to happen is that they'll bid coupon rates of 5% and the yield will be under 5%. So we'll actually reduce the par amount of the bonds. The entire proceeds count against the authorization either way. We have to make an adjustment. The maximum interest rate will be that permitted by law, which currently is 15%, and the final maturity will not be past February 15th, 2051. If we can't meet those, we can't sell the bonds. So those two office places which are designated to sign the bond documents won't have the legal ability to sign those. And if something does happen and we can't meet those for some type of market, something goes wrong in the market that could be impacted by some geopolitical action, we might have to come back to the board. But bonds have been selling pretty smoothly throughout this last few months. After the first round, there was a hiccup, but here lately, the bond markets have been doing pretty well despite what's been going on in the geopolitical market. This is what we expect the debt to look like graphically. And recall that over the years, we've been paying down the debt, the existing debt, that's that gray. We've been doing refundings, we've been doing cash defeasances. What that's allowed us to do now is take advantage of that and do a really large bond issue for this school district, yet keep level debt service. You'll still have capacity in the future as your assessed valuation grows, which we expect it will because your economy is doing well. So you should have capacity in the future to sell bonds with a minimal tax rate impact as well. And this is just a lot of numbers if anybody's interested in looking at those. The key is we're using a 98.5% collection rate when we're doing our calculations, and we have what we believe are very conservative growth rates of 1% through 2033 and none thereafter. Yet we can still meet the 27 cents for the entirety of this bond term. We think all these assumptions are conservative. Skip this page. This is just the 4 different series of bonds, debt service. You see this one's going to start out at about 10 million and increase up to 20 million per year. And then we'll start doing level debt after that. So the next one would be about 6.4 million, then 4.4 million annually, and then 3.5 million. And on the far right, we get as high as the 30 million range over time of this, but we're structuring around existing debt. So we get level debt service when you take into account the existing debt. This is the sources and uses of funds. As I mentioned, we expect to have a net premium. We can apply that premium to the cost of issuance, and so what would legally count against your voter authorization is the premium minus the cost of issuance, or the 190 million. And that's a number that's dictated by statute, how we do that calculation. Finally, this is what we've gone through so far on our calendar since May. We got the PSF guarantee after we applied for that, so we'll have, these bonds will be sold at a AAA rating, which will help us have very good interest rates and receive a lot of bids. We went through our rating process and we got our rating the other day, and so now we're working on posting the official statement, which should happen in a couple of days on a bidding platform, a nationwide platform that all the big banks that will be bidding on this bond issue will use. We will competitively bid it through that process, and once that is done, the documents all have to go to the Attorney General's office to be approved. Mr. Dransfield will take care of that. And if all goes as planned, we will close on September the 17th. And I would be glad to answer any questions.
You have, you brought some paper versions of those?
Yes. Great.
We can get them whenever there's not. Okay, well. Thank you. Thank you. We can entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the order authorizing the issuance and sale of Bryan Independent School District Unlimited Tax School Building Bonds, Series 2006, establishing parameters for the sale and issuance of such bonds and delegating certain matters to authorized district officials.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Stennis, seconded by Mr. Stasny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll move to 6B, tax rate adoption. Consider approval of a resolution setting the tax rate for 2026. Chief Financial Officer, Mrs. Friddle, will present again.
Thank you, Mr. President, board members, Superintendent Carabine. We are back at the podium this evening to consider approval of a resolution setting the district's tax rate for 2026. Before presenting the rate for your consideration, I would like to very briefly address a few common misconceptions. Our goal is to ensure that our board and community clearly understand what the district controls and what it does not. For example, the district sets its tax rate, but it does not determine property values, a common source of confusion. We'll cover this briefly before asking the board to consider approving the proposed tax rate. So one of the most common misunderstandings is that school districts raise their taxes every year, and that is simply not the case. This chart shows Bryan ISD's historical property values, which have increased about 95% over the last decade. While rising property values increase local tax collections, they do not provide the district with additional funding. As local tax collections increase, the state's contribution to the district decreases, essentially leaving the district in a neutral funding position. Property values are determined by the county appraisal district and not Bryan ISD. The state then reviews and certifies those values to ensure that properties are being appraised at market value. These are two separate processes serving two different purposes, and the school district does not control either set of values. The district controls only the tax rate that it adopts. The important takeaway is this: an increase in your property tax bill does not necessarily mean that the district increased its tax rate. If the rate remains the same or even decreases, your tax bill may still increase because your taxable property value increased. So now let's take a look at Bryan ISD's tax rate history. As you can see, our tax rate has actually decreased by about 30% over the last 10 years. You can also see how the rate is divided between M&O and INS. These numbers come directly from the tax assessor collector's records and are available to the public. The district cannot simply raise the tax rate whenever it chooses. The superintendent does not set the tax rate, and the board cannot approve additional M&O pennies without an election. The voters make that decision. So while property values have increased by over 95% over the last 10 years, Bryan ISD's tax rate has actually gone down. Now, to conclude this presentation, we are asking the board to consider approval of a resolution setting the district's total tax rate at .9668 per $100 of taxable value. This includes a 2-cent increase to the M&O portion of the tax rate. I would also like to take one last opportunity to remind our community that the debt service tax rate will not increase. When voters approved our most recent bond program of $397 million, we committed to keeping that tax rate at 27 cents, and we are honoring that commitment. At this time, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I don't have a question, Ms. Riddle, but you have done a wonderful job in explaining that increase, actually the decrease over the last 10 years, which a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of people think everything just keeps on going up and up and up, but actually that has gone down, which is wonderful, that 30% decrease. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Norma, you know, and forgive my ignorance, I should probably know this by now, but when I'm looking at the historical tax rate, and this kind of goes back to my earlier question. Yeah, that slide. So if I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, the M&O portion of the tax rate has gone down dramatically. What causes that? What function takes place that, you know, between 2023 and 2024, I mean, it dropped 19 basis points?
Mm-hmm. Actually, the state has actually been, has had several rounds of tax compression over the last few years, especially beginning since 2019. And that's just been a part of the governor's, I guess, promise to bring property taxpayer relief also. Okay. So school districts are, for the most part, held harmless from those drops in pennies. But it's the tax compression on the M&O side is what you're seeing that's come from the state level.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But even operating under that assumption, it's still lower than what's historically been since 2015.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a few comments that address the complexity of this whole school finance situation. And we as board members have had to deal with it for years, and we sometimes still are scratching our heads because it's hard to get your hands around all of it. One of the things you've already made very clear is that we not only don't have any control over the value of property, but we don't, when property value goes up, we don't, it's not like we get that. We can't, with the same tax rate, get a lot more money because the value went up a lot. It doesn't work that way. The state dictates what we get. They pretty much control the M&O, maintenance and operation, the operating fund. They pretty much control that. And there's some good history behind that because certainly during my long term on the board, there was a lot of inequity in terms of districts that had lots of value were able to generate a lot more income and pay a lot more in salaries and so on, and leaving other districts that were not, didn't have as much of that value in their district, were left struggling to be able to pay competitive salaries and so on. So there was a good reason for all that. But the reality is, again, that leaves us with very little control. And then last session, there was a considerable amount of money that was appropriated for public schools, but it was, again, highly controlled by the legislature. And we were grateful, certainly, that teachers, especially experienced teachers, and, well, in fact, exclusively experienced teachers, got some significant increases. The new teachers really didn't get anything in terms of any additional to cover inflation and so on. There was really not much there for everybody else, or for inflation, for bus transportation and so on. There's so many things we're really still significantly underfunded. The governor, perhaps accurately, said, well, districts got more money than ever before in the last session. But what isn't said or what isn't understood is the session before, with the voucher battle that was, when vouchers were not passed. The unfortunate reality at that point is that virtually nothing was added to what we were able to receive in order to pay our bills that session. There was a big surplus, but we just didn't, and there was a lot of it allocated for education. We just didn't get it. So of course, when you get a big amount 2 years later, that sounds good, but we still haven't made up for inflation. And so we're still struggling to try to find a way to pay people adequately. And again, run the buses, which is not only salaries, but a lot of expense with the buses and the mandates that are imposed on us with seat belts and so on that, of course, are good ideas, but unfortunately, a lot of that is not fully funded. So having said all that, we're in a position to say we're asking for a 2-cent tax rate increase. And if you don't know that background, you think, what are they doing? The values are going way up. They want to raise the tax rate. Are they crazy? That's what some people are thinking because they don't know. And whether it's going to do a lot of good or a little good for me to make this little speech here, I don't know. But that is the hope, is that some people, a lot of people, hopefully will educate themselves, and we've got certainly a job. There are lots of people out there that I hope are knowledgeable enough that will make sure that this word gets out, that what we're doing is not unreasonable. We have, which I think has been made clear, and I say we, it's been a group effort. It's not just, certainly not just the board, but the administration to find ways to cut back. And we've eliminated positions. We are getting close to being in danger of eliminating some of the great programs that we have that make us unique. We haven't had to do much of that yet, but a lot of that's been on the chopping block. And we've just tried to figure out a way to keep it going a little bit longer until we can hopefully figure out ways to avoid shutting things down. We don't know what the future holds. We're going to keep working on that. But this isn't about, well, we're being lazy and we just want to get more money in so we don't have to cut anything. We have been cutting. We've been cutting a lot in terms of position. By attrition, fortunately, we haven't had to do what some districts do and just fire people, basically, just say, well, I'm sorry, we can't keep you. We can't keep you. It's a staff, reduction. We haven't really had to do that, but we have certainly had to tighten our belt. And that's not all a bad thing, of course, but at some point, programs suffer. Students are not going to be taught as well. They're not going to get as much attention as they need, especially those that struggle. And I remind everybody that unlike everybody else out there, we take every kid. And it doesn't matter how much effort it takes to educate that child, we're going to do it. And that is not inexpensive. That is something that's a challenge. So I just hope when the word gets out that, well, Bryan ISD raised the tax rate, if that's successful, and it won't be successful, by the way, unless the voters approve the VADER in November, that they get the whole story. We're trying to do what's best for kids. We're not trying to do the luxury model on anything with regard to salaries and so forth. And by the way, you can say what you want to about what we're going to do with our bonds, but that's a totally separate issue. It really is. That's something that's already been approved by the voters, and that is a level of quality that we certainly want. But it has nothing to do, again, with what we're talking about right now. This is M&O, this is maintenance and operation, this is people, this is salaries, and so on. So I that's the end of my speech. I just felt like that with such a confusing topic, with such room for misunderstanding and perhaps even misrepresentation by some people about how we're being treated by the state, that it needed to be said. And I hope, again, that if anybody has any doubts about what I just said or questions about it, that they get reliable information from the people that can explain it probably even better than I can, which I did the best I could, because this is critical for the future of Bryan ISD.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Stasny. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. We have a motion.
I move approval that the tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $0.9668 per $100 of taxable assessed valuation, which is effectively a 2.10% increase in the tax rate.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Stasny, seconded by Mrs. Benford. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. Okay, we will move to 6C. Information item for a strategic planning update from Deputy Superintendent Dr. Brian Merrill and Chief Financial Officer Mrs. Friddle.
We appreciate the opportunity to come back in, and Mr. Stasny, we appreciate really the lead up into the work that you're going to see. I've been in the boardroom over dozens of times over the last semester, and we started strategic planning back a couple of years ago, and the very first question we received from the committee and the community was, how do we pay teachers more? And so we tabled that item and we went on through strategic planning, and as always, it's an evergreen process. And so depending on the semester and what the committee recommends, we take that guidance. And so as you look at the work that's on the screen, you'll see the many, many days and months that we met. And it wasn't just with the strategic planning group. We did meet in this room, over 100 individuals, very diverse and comprehensive group of individuals that brought their thoughts and opinions each and every day. But you can see that on the left side, starting on March the 3rd. And Ms. Carabine also challenged us to go into the community, into the students, and then we also had an annual campus and department financial review. And so the best thing that we can do is do it very openly, transparently, and make sure that each and every time we meet, all the slide decks are available, they're online, and so that it's very transparent process for our community. And so you can see the many, many meetings that we had. You've heard me speak probably more often than you care to, and that's on the right-hand side, a total of 18 different meetings where we came in and we talked about the process. We updated y'all. You were included, obviously not at a quorum level, but y'all were able to participate in strategic planning as well. Not only did we do that, Ms. Carabine has just a long history of involving through various means our community. And so we talked to our parents on April the 16th, our faith-based partners on April the 24th, our district leadership team on the 30th, teacher advisory on May 6th. Again, all of the board meetings, which, they're open to the public and broadcast and recorded and all that goes into that, as well as on May 4th, Texas School Finance, Key Concepts, and Landscape. And so we wanted to make sure that as much as possible, if the community couldn't be here, we wanted to make sure that they had the information that they needed to know the process. And again, we started with just some basic outcomes. 2 years ago, this was an agenda item that they eventually wanted to talk about. They wanted to delve into, and so beginning in March, that was one of the topics that we talked about, and that would be the VATRE. It was not the only item that was discussed. We also talked about virtual school. We talked about online options. We talked about some open district concepts, and those were all decisions that we brought into the boardroom and that were funneled through and made by our strategic planning group. So we're incredibly appreciative and thankful that those individuals came and met, and again, that they represented their taxpayers and the various folks to be able to really make sure that we took their thoughts to heart. And so we're here today to talk a little bit about what Ms. Friddle's already said, the VATRE, a voter approval tax rate election. It's an election that allows voters to decide whether the school district can increase its maintenance and operation tax rate above the amount allowed by state law. Part of that process, we asked them that if we did call for a voter and if it was to pass, and that $5.5 recurring million was able to come into the district, where would they want to spend the money? Where did they think was the priorities? And as Mr. Stasny already pointed out, and as y'all have shared, compensation is number one. Was one of the top three that they identified. Student programs was another one, and for example, that could mean Kickstart, that could mean athletics, extracurriculars, CTE. It could mean a whole host of things when you look at student programs. And I think it was said in here earlier that Bryan ISD offers an unprecedented amount of opportunities with our student programs, and that is very true. Having been in 2 different districts before this one, we've made lists of opportunities that students have that I'm thankful that my own children got to participate in that I didn't have in other districts. Wonderful districts, but this is a very diverse and varied offering for sure. And then safety and security is always one of our top priorities, and so they had identified a need there as well. And I'll let Ms. Friddle come up and explain the rest.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill. Before we move forward, I want to briefly revisit the tax rate, particularly for anyone who's just tuning in or who may be hearing this conversation for the first time. One of the common misconceptions is that school districts can simply raise their taxes each year without voter approval. That is not the case, and tonight's process demonstrates the transparency and the voter involvement that are required. A school district's tax rate is made up of 2 separate rates, each serving a different purpose. The Maintenance and Operations, or M&O rate, funds the district's day-to-day operations. The Interest and Sinking, or INS rate, is set at the level needed to make principal and interest payments on voter-approved bonded debt. Think of it this way. The debt service rate pays to build and renovate our schools. The M&O rate pays to operate them, our people, our programs, and for keeping the lights on. 2 separate rates for 2 separate purposes. Tonight's proposal only affects the M&O portion of the tax rate. Specifically, we are discussing 2 golden pennies, which I'll explain in a little more detail in just a moment. I also want to make one important distinction. When voters approved our $397 million bond program, we committed to maintaining the INS tax rate at 27 cents, and we intend to honor that commitment. Tonight's conversation is entirely about the M&O side of the tax rate. So as part of tonight's conversation, we thought it would be helpful to show our community where Bryan ISD's tax rate falls compared to other districts in our region and surrounding areas. As you can see, Bryan ISD is on the lower end of this comparison. And while the tax rate is certainly not the only factor that determines employee compensation, the amount of operating revenue available to a district does affect its ability to compete for employees. That is important for Bryan ISD because our labor market extends beyond our immediate neighbors. We are close enough to the greater Houston area that we often find ourselves competing with Houston area districts for teachers, bus drivers, maintenance employees, and other professional positions. So the purpose of this slide is really to provide some context. Bryan ISD has maintained a relatively low tax rate compared to surrounding districts, which also means we have fewer local dollars available for things like employee pay and other operational needs. As we consider our tax rate, we have to think about our ability to remain competitive in the market for our employees. So when we talk about property taxes, there are really 2 sides to the equation, and we need to consider both. We know that it can be frustrating when you open your tax bill and it feels like it just keeps going up every year. And a lot of people naturally assume that means that the school district is raising its tax rate every year, but that's not necessarily the case. The first part of that equation is property values. Over the last 10 years, property values in Bryan ISD have increased about 95%. And as we talked about earlier, Bryan ISD does not set those values. The county appraisal district does. And beyond that, the state validates and then certifies those values. So sometimes school districts get blamed because taxpayers assume that if their tax bill went up, that must mean the school district must have raised its taxes. But that's simply not true. Property values are only one part of the equation. And an extension of that misconception is the assumption that if property values are going up, school districts must be bringing all this additional money. As property values rise, the district may collect more revenue locally, but that does not necessarily mean we have more money overall, because the state formula, the funding formula, adjusts. If you'll follow the cup analogy here on the screen, you'll see that local property taxes fill the cup first, and that is an important concept to understand. So when more money comes in locally, the state generally contributes less to fill the remainder of that cup. That's what you see in the second example. So property values increased and local collections increased. But notice the size of the cup did not change. The state simply contributed less. So once we reach our formula entitlement, that means that our cup is full. Rising property values do not automatically make the cup bigger. Only the legislature can change the size of the cup through school finance funding formulas.
Norma, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Because I always appreciate the cup visual. If we're talking about golden pennies here, which is a net increase to the public's tax rate, and if I'm looking at the cup, and if I'm looking at the brown portion, if the public is just paying more taxes, then the brown portion of that cup goes up, which means, in theory, the state kicks in less. So what, and I know that I hear, well, you know, if we pass these pennies, that's not subject for recapture. But I guess my question is, and I'm trying to understand it, is, okay, the taxpayer pays more, so what's the net benefit? How does that benefit the district? Because just based off this graphic, it just theoretically means that the state kicks in less.
Now, that is what the exact definition of what the golden pennies are. And that's kind of the reward. So in a case where if golden pennies were to actually get approved, that means that we actually get to keep that revenue. And the state does not penalize us by giving us less. In fact, they give us more.
Right.
Okay.
In fact, we get to keep that $2.5 million, and the state says, you know what, we'll even match you. So,
It's, you know, and so I think that's an important distinction, is that,
Do you want to flip to
Yes.
that
Like
slide,
another
and we can
cup.
toggle back?
That's a
well,
good-
and I think that's kind of where I'm headed
Yep.
is,
Yeah,
and I'm sorry that if I asked the question,
No.
I jumped ahead of it,
because
but,
that's exactly what people are going to ask.
well, and that's kind of
But
what,
It's
that-
good for us to talk about it, so we're all saying. the
well,
same
and that's why I want to make sure that, you know, again, it's complicated. But I want to make sure that that everyone understands, and go back, to the cup, is, okay, taxpayer, your taxes are going up, right? So the brown line just goes up a little bit more, but that just means the state kicks in less on the surface. But the reality is that the state is almost not recognizing that additional revenue. They're allowing us to keep it and not penalize us for it.
through the voter approval tax rate election, and by virtue of us getting these two golden pennies, by definition of the state's parameters and how the mechanism and the funding formula works, we are able to keep that
Right.
money.
And so I think Dr. Merrill said it, and I want to emphasize that. It's almost like a separate cup.
That we get to keep, that
Right.
doesn't affect the normal operations if we had
Right.
not been doing this.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that it's clear that the additional revenue that the taxpayer is paying is far and above, or that we get to keep, that it doesn't just, increase the ratio, or that we pay and decrease the ratio of the state
It
support.
almost looks contradictory. Is
Right.
if
Isn't
I'm
there a slide?
increasing the,
Don't you have a slide for this?
This, just to bring this into context, the reason we brought the cup analogy in is simply to make, is simply to make the point that rising values don't necessarily mean
Right.
that school districts. So in the context in which we put it here, we're simply trying to tell the community that just because our values have risen 95% over the last 10 years, it doesn't necessarily mean the district gets to keep
Right.
that.
And that's what I guess I'm trying to get at as a taxpayer. I'm looking at it going, okay, well, you increased my taxes. What was the net gain here? And the reality is that the net gain goes into, the state almost doesn't recognize that as revenue or their portion, how they discern their portion of the cup.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The context of the cup is simply to make, simply to make the statement that your rising property values doesn't necessarily mean school districts get to keep more. It's just a shift in the funding. But the two golden pennies is above and beyond that and a completely separate issue.
Right.
So if our voters were to approve those two golden pennies, we would actually see $5.5 million of recurring revenue above and beyond the normal state funding.
But that answers what you're saying?
Yes.
The state does give more. We've said, okay, we're going to cash in on these two golden pennies. So the state is, year after year after year, once we say, okay, we want these, now the state is going to give 2.5, I think?
I believe slide 11
Yeah.
is going to go into more detail.
Okay.
But do you want to explain to the community listening in the reason they call it enrichment pennies, only for the golden, not the copper, is to add that extra value? To your point, we don't want the community to think that, well, we get the 2 pennies, but then it just disappears in that cup that gets capped.
Right.
This is above and beyond. This is for enrichment.
And that's kind of where I'm,
Can I just say this, our cup runneth over. I think we can stay with the cup. You're gonna add to the brown, and you're gonna add to the yellow too. We're gonna
Correct.
keep both of it. It's
They
nothing's
both
going
go,
down.
it's going to go shoot.
The yellow goes up, the brown goes up, the yellow goes up, and wow.
That's
It's so
an excellent
So-
analogy, Mr. Stasny. That's absolutely right. The brown's going to go up, they're both going to go up.
They both go up, exactly. And that's the magic of
Yes,
the golden penny,
that's
which
the
is why
magic.
we really are going to be really grateful if we can get this passed, because this is a unique opportunity that is not normal for any other option we have.
Correct, thank you. And to your point earlier, this is absolutely all voter-driven and voter approval. So yes. Okay, so now let's take a look at the other part of the equation. What actually happened to Bryan ISD's tax rate over those same 10 years where property values went up? As you can see here, our tax rate actually went down by 30% over that same time period. You can also see how that rate is divided between M&O and INS. And just to mention, these are not random numbers that we created for this presentation. These numbers came directly from the tax assessor collector's records, which is public information. I also want to remind our community that school district tax rates are highly regulated. The superintendent cannot simply raise the tax rate, and the board cannot arbitrarily add additional M&O pennies. The board can call an election and give the voters the opportunity to decide, but ultimately, that decision belongs to the voters. So I hope these visuals have been helpful in giving our community a better understanding of the relationship between property values and tax rates. These are two separate pieces, but they work together to determine the property taxes that you ultimately pay. So now let's talk about the 2 pennies that we are considering on the M&O side of the tax rate. There are a few important things to understand about how these pennies work. Together, these 2 golden pennies would generate about $5.5 million a year in recurring operating revenue. Those dollars can support things like employee compensation, instructional programs, transportation, and other day-to-day costs of operating the district. Another important factor to consider is how that $5.5 million breaks down. Local tax collections would generate approximately $2.5 million, while the state will contribute the other 3 in additional funding. So this funding formula is actually very favorable to the district. That's why these are referred to as golden pennies, because they generate the highest funding yield available to a school district. And finally, these golden pennies are not subject to recapture, which means that every dollar generated stays right here in Bryan ISD to support our local budget and our local priorities. And of course, this brings us to the question that's probably on everyone's mind. How much is this going to cost me? Quite frankly, the answer is going to be a little bit different for everyone. We have more than 85,000 properties in Bryan ISD, and every tax situation is unique, depending on the value of the property, the type of the property, and any exemptions that may apply. So for the purposes of this presentation, we kept the example very simple. We're using a home with a market value of about $350,000 and applying the homestead exemption. For that homeowner, the estimated impact of the 2 additional pennies would be about $42 for the year or $3.50 for the month. At the end of the day, the calculation starts with the taxable value of your individual property. That's why we can't give one number that applies to every taxpayer. But this example gives our community a simple way to understand what 2 additional pennies could potentially look like for a typical homeowner. And then one more thing to keep in mind, just as we said earlier, every taxpayer's situation is different. For homeowners age 65 and older who qualify for the school property tax ceiling, their school district taxes are generally capped or frozen. As long as they continue to qualify and have not made improvements to the home that would increase that ceiling, these 2 additional pennies would not increase their school district tax bill. We just want to make sure our community understands that important distinction as we move forward in the process. Be happy to answer any questions.
I have, oh, go ahead. Did you?
Go.
No, you go ahead, because mine's wrong.
So thank you guys for doing the strategic planning. I attended a lot of those too. Wonderful information, a lot of information I didn't know in the beginning. So, and a lot of people attended those meetings. And, you know, we're here for the school district. We're here for the staff, the students, all the programs we offer. And a lot of people don't understand that at the end of the day, this is what this is about. But thank you again
Absolutely.
for everything.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a couple things. So, first of all, and I've said this before, our bonds were for nice, shiny, great buildings, auditoriums, brand-new Bryan Collegiate. And what we're discussing here is what I'm sure all of us are most excited about, because this is the money to pay our teachers, our staff, our bus drivers, paraprofessionals, mechanics, cafeteria ladies, you know, and a lot of those people were our students, and they've grown up. Now they're giving their heart back to the district. This is where the money comes from to pay them, to pay, yes, you too, but to pay those that work so hard and are always so vulnerable to the state to get money and to raise their salaries. And I know there's not a person in here tonight that would not want to raise the hourly salary, the hourly income and salaries of our people. So that's what we're talking about. When Mr. Adams stood up a minute ago and he gave us all those numbers, relatively hardly any of that It goes for our kids because it's the bonds, it's the buildings, it's the new gym at Rudder. You know, all of that is for our kids and our staff. But hardly, well, I don't know. What we're talking about tonight with these golden pennies that the voters could give approval to the state to give our district the ability to pay our coaches, to pay the teachers, to buy the instructional materials. This is down in the trenches. You know, you said a minute ago, our programs that we have to offer. None of that hardly, it does indirectly, but none of that came off that big spreadsheet that Mr. Adams showed us a minute ago. This is what we're talking about, and it's the only way, really right now, that we could make our salaries competitive for our teachers, our staff. I know right now, our starting teachers average $53,500. Right down in Waller, it's $64,000. Katy, $66,500. Cypress Fairbanks, $65,000. And these are all the same kids coming out of college. In Conroe, $63,500. So that's $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, and $13,000 more than we are able to offer brand new teachers right now. And so even though there's not that there's few kids going into education now, and so it's just such a competitive market for teachers or anybody in education. And we said, well, what about College Station? Well, we're pretty much right together, but even they are after the same people that are making $10,000, $13,000 within an 80-mile radius. So we have got to become more competitive to get the teachers, certified teachers that we need. We want them. They would love to come to us. I think we take care of our teachers. We have good insurance, but we have got to put this in their pockets. And this is the way, a VATRE, where the voters could approve this at relative $3.50 a month for typical average home, could pay their sons and daughters who might want to go into education, coaching, band, Kickstart, all the things that we have to offer, and keep their kids at home. Plus, if you're 65 or older and you have a homestead exemption, we're not even talking 65 or older that this would affect. Okay, thank you.
Good job.
I think I'm going to ask a question that's going to come across as me playing devil's advocate. I mean, and I know that it yields $5.5 million back to the M&O side and things and the operations, and I know that by the math, it's 86% of our overhead is salaries. But I think that it's also important that if we, I'm sitting here, and I know we've seen slides in the past about, where we rank in terms of how we pay our bus drivers and so forth. Everybody. But I think it's just important to note or say that the emphasis here of that $5 million is to not keep that $5 million at the top, but it's to facilitate it and spread it everywhere. Does that make sense?
To the staff.
To the staff.
Yeah.
Because, I think that it's important that if we're asking for the taxpayers to help us fund this, that they know that the points of emphasis within that side of the ledger is dedicated to that area of the staff.
Yes, sir, we will be sharing that with our staff and our community. As Dr. Merrill pointed earlier, some of the outcomes of the Strategic Planning Committee, the Finance Focus Group, was compensation was at the top of the priority list, so we will be sharing out all of that.
Yeah, I think that the great thing about the bond that was passed, that it was objective. We could see a dollar amount associated with a field house, or a scoreboard, or turf, or a gymnasium, or whatever. But I think that transparency and that visual helps the taxpayer understand that's where these dollars are going to be dedicated to.
Yes, sir, we've been working very closely with the HR team and TASB we've run a few simulations, a low, mid, and high models of compensation plans, especially our auxiliary employees who are grossly underpaid. So we are focusing on those employee categories, but everybody will see something out of this for sure. But
Okay. Well, and I think just to kind of echo Ms. Waller's point is taking care of our staff, and that includes everybody.
Everyone.
yes.
Yes, our hourly employees, I know that's where you're heading,
Yeah.
and that definitely is one of our major points of emphasis. So when you talk about the TASB study that we did, they came in and looked at it, those were recommendations that they made to bring us back in line or put us in a position where not only we're competing, but we might even be over market for some of our neighboring people. But
Good.
like Ms. Friddle said, we're competing, and as everybody points out, with the Houston market, College Station, all of the surrounding areas. And so it's not only for the teachers and administrators, but it's also for the hourly employees, the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, maintenance crew. All of those guys are out there looking for and comparing. And in some cases, $2.50, it all makes a difference. And so we would definitely not only want to be competitive, but we would like to attract and pull from those neighboring districts. And in some cases, or most cases, even one that's south of us, they have already exercised their golden pennies. So when you look at it, those are already in play for them. They've already voted them in. They've already done that. And so this would put us in an advantage, I guess, to some degree of allowing us to be able to go out and what those three things that the strategic planning suggested that we would be able to put in place.
Thank you. And I just want to point out too, from a community and communication standpoint, when we got into the budget, it would have been real easy for us to. I mean, I stare at budgets all the time, and you can make them whatever you desire. But it would have been real easy for us to make that number a deficit and make it look big and scary, and the communication to the public is, golly gee whiz, we just can't afford it. We're just going, we don't know what to do, so please give us some money.
Bail us out.
Yeah, bail us out. But I think that does a disservice
It does.
to the hard work that's gone and taken place over the last 12 months. That there is a concerted and conscious effort to get this thing right, to put in the hard work, to lean up our P&L, so to speak, and that we are conservative in our estimations, and that this additional funding is an investment. It's not a bailout. It is us investing in our staff, and I just want to make sure that it's clear and understood that there's a different messaging here that is taking place.
Yes, sir. And this whole conversation even goes back a couple of years when we looked at our end of the fiscal year. That was a strategy that we used a couple of years ago to be able to position the district to recoup or not spend some money and move it differently. It's a one-time thing, and so we saved millions of dollars doing that. And then this year we looked at every position, and we went through it looking to try to, as you say, balance a budget or make sure that we're not going out to the community asking them to bail us out. And so we haven't put ourselves in that position, and we look at every position moving forward. We keep a ledger. Tommy and Norma, we are constantly looking at that and evaluating every position to make sure if it's needed or can we shift responsibilities, how do we do work, what does that look like? And so that is a constant effort, and we're better for it. we're better for it, we're leaner, we're tougher, and we're poised to continue to make great strides in growth. And so we know that if this passes, this is only additional fuel to the fire, and it allows us to move in a leaner fashion forward. But nonetheless, we didn't want to put the taxpayers, we didn't want to put the district, we didn't want to put ourselves in that position. And so I appreciate you pointing that out. And
Well, and I appreciate a good analogy, and the best way I can think of it, I have a 15-year-old son who, if he comes to me and says, Dad, I want to borrow $30, and I go, well, what are you going to do with it? And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm just going to go. But if he says, I want to borrow $30 because I'm going to go fill up a tank of gas, because then I'm going to go fill up a lawnmower, and I'm going to mow 20 yards, and I'm going to get in a lawn mowing business, that's a different conversation.
thank you.
And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here.
I appreciate that.
In a
That's a
way.
great analogy.
Just came up with it. Thanks.
That's pretty smart. Yeah, that's pretty good. And to further it in, you give him 30 and someone else is going to come back around and give him a 45 or something like that.
Right.
And so that 30 turns into 70, which is basically what we're talking about.
That's what I'm getting
I know that math's not exactly right, but Bob's going to hold me to that. So I'm not saying it's approximation. She's the CFO. I'm not the CFO, so I can approximate it. But that's really what it's saying. That $30 investment in your son would turn around. It wouldn't be 60. It would even be more than that. It might be 65 or 67 or something like that. I'll let the calculators figure it out, but that's what it is. So that's, we're hoping that people will ask and they'll get out and if you call for it, that would be able to educate them and talk about it. And again, we're not going to advocate in any way. We're just going to tell the facts about what's happening.
And I like what David said, that it's not, we're begging or you're bailing us out. For some of our staff, I think about this as the boots on the ground people, like Ruthie said. We can have the best insurance in the world. Doesn't make a difference if they can't afford it.
Yes, ma'am.
And so this is going to be able to allow some of those staff that have families that are not making what we would like for them to make, to be able to have not only the money to pay for living, for their livelihood, but also for insurance and for their children and for them to be healthy. And so it's just making life comfortable for everyone in the district. And I know sometimes the state, they put their money where they think is best needed. They do what they want to do with it. Sometimes they make bad decisions, but that's on them. But the fact that we're trying to look out for all of our staff, and we recognize, because if we lose bus drivers, I can't drive a bus. I don't know about Joel or anybody else. I can't get nobody's kids to school. I might can cook for them a little bit, but the other stuff, I just can't do it. And without those people, us taking care of those people, just sends a bad message if we don't do what we can for the people.
Well, I think one of the things I'm not sure everybody agrees that this should be even a focal point, but I don't want anybody to, it's not a bailout. I agree it's not a bailout, but there's another part of this that people need to understand is that they should not assume that, well, you seem to be doing fine. You said you got a balanced budget for this coming year, so I guess you don't really need it. I don't think it's inappropriate to mention that part of our balanced budget is selling a piece of surplus property. That's part of our balanced budget, isn't it? Am I missing something? And so that's not a long-term strategy. Okay, every year we're going to balance our budget, so we're going to find some property to sell. So yeah, we've got it balanced. We fortunately got it down to a point where that sale, or the sale would help us out. And we're happy to do that. We didn't really need the property. That's great. But it's a reminder that if anybody thinks, oh, well, you can do without, you don't need the tax rate increase, you don't need the 5.5 million or whatever, that shouldn't be overlooked. It is a reality that we work very hard to get where we are, but we still needed to sell some property to balance the budget. And I don't think that fact should be hidden, because I don't want anybody to think, well, you don't really need it after all, do you? You got a balanced budget.
Yes, sir. That was strategic. by design. When you think about even the bond and what we built with Halliburton, we were able to consolidate resources. We were able to pull all of those programs and departments that were all over the district, and we were able to move them over to Halliburton and streamline that process, which then allowed us to be able to open up a piece of property that we would be able to move on. And so it's all by design. And, you know, yes, that's included in that, not completely. I think it's only partially of what we expect to be able to get for that property. And so again, as we move through, yes, it's in there. We're doing our best not to depend on that. We are looking at every position as we go forward to make sure that that budget is, we're not spending everything. And Ms. Friddle and her department have gone to great lengths to make sure that every dollar is accounted for. We look at all the different types of expenditures, and when you think about it, even Skyward, the addition of Skyward gave us a more robust ability to be able to track that and be able to monitor that we didn't have with our previous system that we now have. And we're thankful for that. And that was a few years ago that we brought that on board. And that was a heavy lift. We're still moving through that we just sort of take for granted. But the technology department and everyone really leaned into our data department. Jennifer Lemons, everyone gave us that ability to get down into the details, which are needed to make sure that we can look our taxpayer in the eyes. I live here, I pay the taxes. I want to be able to go out and look people in the eye at the grocery store and let them know why we're doing what we're doing. And strategically, over the course of years, we involved 100 different people as transparently as possible. And if you go back and watch Dr. Driver talk about last week, she said one of the things she appreciated was the open-handed, transparent nature in which that committee operated. We brought a topic, they asked for additional details, we brought them additional details, we didn't direct them to a conclusion, we allowed them to form the conclusion. And I've shared multiple times, even with the bond, I thought we were going this way and we would go this way and then we'd go back, and we landed where we ultimately did. And I'm so very thankful that as we were working that process, they brought their opinions, they brought their thoughts, and they weren't just yes people. And that's directly out of one of our committee members that I'm very, very thankful that she brought to the table.
And Mr. Status, to add to your comment earlier about just the investment and the analogy with the dollars, we are investing, our business office is investing in a lot of training and opportunities. We've created a lot of cost awareness through just an entirely redefined budget process, and we are bringing everybody to the table, and there's lots of teach pieces that happen sometimes daily, just to let everyone know what is it that we're doing and why do we do it. So we are explaining and we are training and we are investing in our campus principals and our department heads. We are going campus to campus and just sharing, again, creating awareness so that everybody understands where is the money going. So we've come back to the table and the work is not done. We continue and we will continue. The work will always continue. Education, we're learning every single day. We've got campus admins, directors across the district that just kind of have come to me and said, oh my gosh, Norma, we were never aware that we were spending this much money. Or they thanked me for actually, enforcing the zero-based budgeting process. And they never realized, what a function was, what an object was, and all the transparency that comes along with that, and the educational pieces. Again, we've created a lot of cost awareness. We fixed Skyward has been very instrumental in helping us and bring visibility and transparency to the position control process throughout the district. We've been working with our HR teams very regularly, again, to make sure that we are accounting for and validating every single position that comes across our chair. So the work has not stopped, it will not stop, and we will continue to invest in educating our employees on the finances so that we can grow and make decisions all along the way.
And we're picking back up with strategic planning. I came in and presented, I believe it was last board meeting, about what's coming next. And we're constantly looking at those efficiencies and making sure that we're making strategic decisions. And we've said this before. We don't want to do things to people. We want to do things with people. And that's a very important, I think, differentiation between the process and the way that it goes. And so we're constantly evaluating and doing strategic planning to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can as efficiently as possible, while at the same time, we want to make sure students have the best experiences possible. We want to make sure they're prepared for life after graduation, and that process is just enjoyable. I mean, it's life-changing because it's the only chance they get.
And speaking of efficiencies, thank you, Dr. Merrill, for that reminder. We are actually right in the middle of a required efficiency audit. So we have engaged Mo Casey Services to actually go through that process. So we will be bringing those results to the board here very soon. So just want to remind the public, in case you're tuning in for the first time, we are required as a district to go through an efficiency audit, again, to Mr. Stennis's point, to make sure that this is not a bailout. So we're actually going through that process right now, going through all the intake information. It's been a staff effort here, so we're going through that process right now.
One more thing, and then I'll be quiet, but I think of maintenance and operations, which is this side of the financial equation. Maintenance is like yearly maintenance on what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. And operations is a yearly operations of who's teaching it and how it's being taught.
Yeah, the names are weird, aren't they? I mean, INS, M&O, we use them so fluently, and I can remember the first time I heard those terms, I was like, I can't keep track of what's happening, and they just get confusing. So I appreciate you making that delineation, because it's just these random terms that we say, and we even abbreviate them, and we make them more confusing. And so absolutely, the M&O is our people, the electricity, all of the things that it takes. I think you mentioned educational resources. All of those are things that are impacting the day-to-day operations, and not to suggest that the other side, the INS, another interest in sinking, which is a confusing term as well, is just a different concept altogether. It's the buildings. And so, yes, there is two different sides, which we tried to represent with the buckets and whatever you do, but man, we didn't help ourselves out with these titles at all.
And we recruit all the time. We tell our own students, hey, go into career and technology, become a mechanic, become a carpenter, and we would love to hire you. Or we tell our ambassadors, which are the little cheerleaders for the district, man, go get your educational degree. We want you to come back and teach for us. And so we want to pay them. We want them to want to come back to us, because they can make a very good living if they come and teach and work for Bryan ISD.
I think an easy way to remember that whole M&O, Ms. Waller, is just maintain and operate. So those are the dollars that generated from the M&O side of the tax rate. Those dollars are used to maintain what we have and keep our operations going, keeping the lights on, paying our staff, transporting our students, making sure that we have the instructional materials, the quality instructional materials that we need to educate our students. And on the other side of the tax rate is our debt service. That rate is simply set at the level needed to make our debt obligations. So one maintains and operates, and the other ones, like we said, one is for buildings and the other is for operations, to keep those buildings open and running.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty, let's move to 6D. Order calling a voter approval tax rate election. Chief Financial Officer, Mrs. Norma Friddle.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Before we move to consideration of the order, I want to sincerely thank the board for your guidance, your thoughtful questions, and active participation throughout this process. Your willingness to carefully consider the district's needs and perspectives shared by our staff and our community have been incredibly valuable. At this time, are there any other additional questions or comments before the board considers the order calling the election?
Well, when I first saw the sequence of events on the agenda, it was slightly confusing, because we've already voted for a tax rate that includes this, correct? If it passes, I mean, we have to pass this in order for it to go to 96, correct?
We first need to adopt our tax rate, which essentially is above the current voter approval rate.
Which can't happen without the voter.
Correct. So they are each two separate processes. We have already adopted our tax rate, which is 2 cents above the voter approval rate. That's what triggers this process right here. So two separate decisions, two separate motions, two separate actions.
I understand they're separate, but they are obviously very closely connected because
Yes.
we're not going to get a 96 point whatever tax rate if this doesn't pass.
If the order is not called for the board to call the
If the
election.
Vader didn't pass in November, it's not going to be what we said the tax rate would be because we have to get voter approval to get the extra 2 cents. That's what's confusing. So I'm just saying we've already voted on the tax rate, but the tax rate is dependent on what we're getting ready to consider. You look like you're still not sure that you're agreeing with me.
The board has to call an election now that we have approved the tax rate above the 2 cents that is currently the voter-approved tax rate. So now
I think we're agreeing, I'm not sure, but I just, I don't see that you can successfully adopt a tax rate that is not allowed by law unless you pass the Vader, because that's what I thought is the case here, or either I'm really confused.
Adopting a tax rate above the voter approval rate is what triggers the election.
Okay.
So now we have to vote on, now the board actually calls the election. That's the formality. We've reached the formality of actually the board calling the election.
Okay.
And this is the step that we're in.
I guess in my mind, it's all a contingency. It's when the election occurs, if the Vader failed, what's our tax rate?
Oh, we'll,
Who makes you do it? Who makes us do it that way, Norma? I mean,
this is actually driven by state law.
Okay.
So we will have to come back to the board and readopt our tax rate if it fails.
Okay. I think I'm following you.
Well, I'd like to say that I think that the consideration of putting this forth in front of our community is something that our board takes extremely seriously, and it's been on my mind for quite some time. And I'm thankful for our leadership for bringing the community into this building and having conversations about what their feelings were about this decision. And we've discussed it. We discussed it in your budget development series, which was very educational. It's been something that on numerous occasions has been presented to try to gain clarity on what this decision means. And I think as board members, we kind of have a dual role. It's number one, to serve our community and look out for the best interests of our school children in our district. And then on the other side of that, it's to position the school district for long-term success. And I think in this type of decision, you really have to evaluate both sides as you consider it. And I think it's shocking to me to just read the information that's coming out across the state of Texas from school districts. The costs, the rising costs, the mandates that are not always accompanied by sufficient funding from the state. All of the things have started to rear their ugly head in across the state, and we're seeing school closures, loss of programs, fees being charged for participation in programs, to ride a bus. Everybody is in a position of, it feels desperate. And that's a scary time for public schools. But I credit our administration for seeing the writing on the wall, because since I've been on this board, we have had this discussion about how to be more efficient. how can we find opportunities to reduce our expenditures? Utilizing attrition. I mean, that's certainly better than losing employees, but that also means we're asking our employees to do more in so many instances. We've aligned staffing models with our enrollment. We've made budget cuts across the district, which is, something that's difficult for our staff to work through. And I know that we did present a balanced budget, and there is consideration of the sale of assets, which is a one-time opportunity to balance the budget, but it doesn't go beyond that. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that this work that's been happening to be more efficient, it doesn't stop with this decision. It continues because our desire, I believe all of our desire, is to improve compensation, to reward our employees, to retain them and make their careers more enjoyable, more comfortable, so they'll stay here and continue working with us. And also to just protect the incredible amount of programs that our community loves. You cannot find a program in our district that someone is not extremely passionate about. There's so many children that are served through these programs, and we create some fabulous opportunities for them, and they're important, and they make us unique. They provide a better education and experience for our students, and that's what's at stake. And I think that it's important that our community knows that that's the objective. And I agree that this isn't bailing us out. And I think the work that's happened over the last several years to create those efficiencies and be smarter in how we're doing business is the reason why. But as we face these challenges from the funding, from how we receive our funding and the limitations of that, I had a feeling that, it's kind of one of those scenarios where sometimes being put in difficult situations makes you better. And this is an instance where it was critical that we make some changes and get smarter about how we do things. And I hate the fact that the public school system is struggling financially, but I also admire the fact that we're getting better, and it shows. And so, it's two things. It's like, yes, we need funding from our community because our community is carrying the burden of what the state has limited. But at the same time, I personally want the community to know that we're getting stronger and we're getting better, and I have incredibly high hopes and expectations for where we go from here. And and I know that however this vote goes, the district is prepared to provide more than enough information about this, not from a position of advocacy, but from just the facts, to make sure that our community has the information they need as they make this decision. So, thank you. And thank you, Norma, for your work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I move that the Board of Trustees adopt an order calling a voter approval tax rate election to be held on November the 3rd, 2026 by the Bryan Independent School District.
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Benford, seconded by Mrs. Waller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to our board member reports. We have a executive board committee report from Mrs. Ruthie Waller.
So the executive committee met July the 29th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The committee members present, Mr. Joel Bryan, myself, Felicia Benford, Ms. Carabine, Dr. Brian Merrill, Ms. Friddle, and we began talking about school finance presented by Ms. Friddle. We discussed information relating to general revenue in the district. Ms. Friddle has addressed the details in today's board meeting. We talked about school property. Ms. Carabine gave us information. She shared information that we will discuss in closed session as posted on our board agenda. Dr. Merrill brought information to us about update with safety and security services. We discussed information related to the requirement to have armed security guards at schools, specifically elementary and intermediate schools, because we use Bryan Police Department and school resource officers at our middle and high schools. This matter is posted on our board agenda for tonight's meeting. That's it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just put ice in my mouth.
Okay, item number 8A, our first information item, benefits plan financial update. Mrs. Norma Friddle, again.
Thank you, Mr. President, board members, Superintendent Carabine. I cannot believe that we are back in the boardroom talking about planning for our 2027 benefit year. Half the year has already gone by and we are already looking ahead. Tonight is not an action item. We are simply going to revisit where we left off. We're going to provide a brief update on where our health plan stands today, and then talk through some of the considerations as we begin planning for 2027. For our staff and community who may be hearing this message for the first time, we'll be providing a little context along the way, and then we'll close our conversation with our benefits timeline and next steps. So if you recall from our last meeting, we shared that we had put together an employee focus group, and we held 2 meetings with a variety of employees across the district. We really wanted to invest that time so that what they learned could be carried back to our employees, and that could help build a better understanding of our health plans across the district. We used those meetings as an opportunity to educate and to also listen. We walked and we talked through some of the basic insurance terminology, and we explained what it meant for Bryan ISD to operate under a self-funded model. And from there, we took the conversation a little further, and we talked about how claims are paid. We reviewed our premiums history, and then we closed with a brief overview of the current financial health plan. This is one of the slides that we shared with our group so that they could really see the trend for themselves. Over the last 25 years, medical inflation has outpaced general inflation by more than 30%. And unfortunately, this is not unique to Bryan ISD. School districts across the state and across the country are feeling the same pressures. There is really no single solution here, and in many ways, the entire healthcare system continues to become more expensive and more difficult to manage. So we bring this back simply as a reminder that the financial pressure on our plan is real. And speaking of that, the financial pressure on our health plan is very real, about $5 million real, as claims have continued to exceed premiums collected. As you can see, this really isn't a new issue. We've had several positive years from 2012 through about 2016, but beginning around 2017, the plan started moving in a different direction, and we've not been able to get back to a solid financial footing. We continue to share this visual with our staff and our community because it helps tell the story of where we've been, and it gives us some important context as we consider how to move the plan forward. Now, this is another important piece of context. Of the roughly 1,200 districts across Texas, only a small percentage operate under a self-funded plan model. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean self-funding is a bad model, but it does mean that we are assuming more of a financial risk ourselves. When claims come in higher than expected, that cost stays with the district. So the benefit of self-funding is flexibility and greater control, but the trade-off is that we have to be very intentional about premiums, reserves, plan designs, and how we manage our claims. So to take the conversation a little further, I got curious and I asked our risk manager to dig a little deeper and look at which districts are self-funded versus fully insured. And this is what we're seeing across the state. We continue to hear about districts moving away from self-funding models after experiencing significant losses. And when you connect that back to medical inflation, it makes perfect sense. Self-funding gives you flexibility, but it also means that you carry the risk when claims continue to rise. I went into the latest financial reports for several of the self-funded districts listed here. So where you see a number beside a district, that reflects what I found in their most recent audit report. And what stood out is that many of these districts are also struggling financially with their health plans. So this slide here is really just intended to show where we see the highest participation across our employee groups. For example, among principals and assistant principals, about 69% are enrolled in the PPO Gold Plan, 21% are enrolled in the high deductible plan, and only about 10% decline coverage altogether. So roughly about 90% of that group participates in one of our health plans. You can also see that across both plans, the highest concentration of enrollment is in the employee-only tier. So when it comes to managing the cost of a self-funded health plan, there are really only so many levers that we can move. The first is the district's contribution. We currently contribute $545 per month per employee, which is already higher than many of the districts that I've seen in our region. Every additional $10 costs the district about $300,000 annually. That second lever is employee premiums. We are currently evaluating potential premium adjustments for both the PPO and the high deductible plans for 2027. And the third lever is plan design. One of the advantages of being self-funded is the flexibility to adjust things like deductibles, co-insurances, co-pays, and out-of-pocket maximums. At this time, we are not recommending changes to the PPO plan because we just implemented the new tiered structure. We want to give that design We want to give that plan design some time to develop some history so that we can determine whether it's producing the results that we intended. We are, however, looking at some potential changes to the high deductible plan design, and we expect to bring these back for discussion at our next meeting. And finally, one of the most important levers we have is employee education. We need our employees, especially our new employees, to understand how a self-funded plan works and how their healthcare choices affect both their own costs and the overall plan. Our mandatory informational sessions will begin in October, leading directly into open enrollment so that the information is fresh on their minds as employees make their benefit elections. So speaking of employee education, this continues to be one of our most important strategies. This year, we're going to spend more time helping employees understand how our self-funded plan works and how their healthcare choices affect both their own cost and the overall plan. We will continue educating them about the financial impact of using freestanding ERs for non-emergent care, and will address some of the common misconceptions around our high deductible plans. We're also going to spend some time explaining the differences between a health savings account, or HSA, and a flexible spending account, or FSA. These are two very different tools, and we want our employees to understand how they each work and which option may be the best fit for them. As we move into year 2 of our PPO tiered network, we'll go a little deeper there as well. We'll continue to show employees how the tiers work, how to find Tier 1 and Tier 2 providers, and how to use that information to make more informed choices when they are shopping for their care. And just to help close the conversation, I shared this slide with you at our last presentation to give everyone a snapshot of where we stand financially. We are now halfway through the year, so we have some actual data to work with. And while we have made some progress in the right direction, we are still projected to add to the negative fund balance if no changes are made. Ultimately, the goal is for this plan to be self-sustaining. What we've done over the last several years has not been enough to get us there, so we need to keep that in mind as we make decisions moving forward. Premium increases are never easy, and they are certainly not something that we take lightly. But as medical costs and inflation continue to put pressure on our plans, we have to make thoughtful decisions that move the plan toward long-term sustainability. And just to wrap things up, here's a quick look at our 2027 benefits timeline. We've already completed our focus group meetings, and August is really about planning and feedback. We'll be talking through our options and making sure that we're thinking very carefully about the decisions ahead. We'll come back to you on September the 14th with a recommendation for consideration and approval. And then October kicks off our informational sessions, and this is where a lot of education takes place that ultimately leads us into open enrollment, which begins November 2nd and runs through November the 20th. And then, of course, our new plan year begins January 1. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Norma, for as long as I can remember, we've had self-funded plan. For a long, long time, about the same period of time, we perceived as a board that there was advantages to that and that we wanted to do it. And I don't know what those all were, but obviously we weren't always losing money. And like you said, there's flexibility. I think it's time for us to get a real clear understanding of how TRS plan works compared to us, and obviously other districts are switching. I don't want to throw that out as something we should do because I don't have a clue yet, but at the same time, I just think it's time for us to know what's going on. I mean, what is the big difference in terms of especially cost, so that we can make some real decisions for the future? Because again, without that information, I don't know, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So I assume you know what I'm talking about here. I don't know, obviously these other districts had to do some studies and look at how to compare the two premiums, benefits, et cetera, flexibility, all those things. But I just, with this chronic deficit and despite all the efforts that have been put into this, I just think it's time to take a hard look at it.
We can certainly, I can bring back some information to the board at our next meeting regarding that.
Well, I don't know, it has to be our next meeting, but we just, at some point, and I don't know when the timing would be, if we were going to consider making a switch. I don't know what hoops you have to jump through to do that, but obviously if other districts have done it, maybe it's not something that's necessarily all that difficult. So, this is the first time I've brought this up, so I'm kind of springing it on you. I don't know about the timing. I don't know how much, is there just a window where we could do this? Our plan ends in end of the year, correct? Or that's how it works, the calendar year. So it would seem like, I guess, if we were going to possibly change, it would need to be possibly then at the beginning of the next year, at the end of this plan year.
at minimum, making any major changes. We will have to continue to operate under a self-funded model for this next cycle.
Okay.
And I could certainly get some more information regarding
Okay.
details.
Well, it just, at some point, I think the discussion has to happen. I don't know if anybody else agrees or disagrees with me, but I don't see how we can continue to not at least consider it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update. We'll move to 8B. This will be an update on the Bryan ISD Virtual Academy. Associate Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Barbara Ibarra, will present.
Good evening, Mr. President and Board. Thank you so much for having me this evening. We're excited to share an update on the Bryan Virtual Academy. As the board is well aware, this is the first time in district history and really in Texas history that school districts have had the opportunity to extend flexible learning options to families. And so we have embarked on this journey, and it's been well received by our community and by our stakeholders. To date, so far, we're a little over 230 applications to the Virtual Academy. Of those, we feel like 130 of them are a good fit based on the parameters that we shared earlier in the spring. And we've also talked with a few families who were kind of on the cusp of that and went ahead and permitted entry with provisions of support and oversight to make sure the students are successful. Ultimately, that is our goal, to make sure that if you embark on this journey with us, that you have all the support you need to have a thriving year, not just a successful year. Of those 130 students that have received acceptance letters to the academy, 50 of them are not currently enrolled in Bryan Independent School District. And of those 50, 25 of them are not currently district residents, so they are from outside our attendance boundaries. And they range from all over the place, including nearby neighborhoods to as far as the northern Houston area. So certainly garnering some support from across the region and across the state. Of those, again, you see the breakdown there, grades 3 through 6, as you would expect, is the smaller enrollment group of about 30 students. Similarly for grades 7 and 8. And then the largest population comes from our 9th through 12th graders. And in that population, I would say it's more heavily weighted to the 11th and 12th graders in the group, who are already kind of wrapping up their credits and they're on their way, but want to make sure they finish strong. We have every kind of learner you could possibly imagine, including those that are taking 100% dual credit courses, but are still enrolled in Bryan ISD. So a lot of exciting things developing for this inaugural year of the Bryan Virtual Academy. We had a group of students over the past several weeks. There were 6-7 sessions of Connect and Launch, and that's essentially where the parent came with their student to the Bryan ISD Administration Building, and we went through a number of stations and orientation information with the families and with the students, including the agreement for participation and what it means to set up your independent learning station. How does a parent observe how the student is progressing in the course? Issuing the Chromebooks, our technology team was there for that, as well as accounts and student IDs for those. Every student needs an ID because they will come on site to do assessments, but also for our hybrid students who are coming on site daily to participate in cosmetology, CTE courses, athletic courses, choir, all sorts of things. We also gave them a quick, who do you contact? It can be a different environment. So how do I get help if my student needs help? But it was a wonderful time with our families. At this point, we're doing it on a rolling basis rather than all at one time. We are still accepting applications and they are still rolling in. In fact, they're doing advising on a group of students that did it today and then again tomorrow, trying to get them set up before the first day of school. Everyone who's applying at this point, we're working them in as we're able to, so we're instructing them to go to the first day of school on their home campus, wherever that may be for them, and we will get with them once their application has been reviewed and we've done advising with them. We would like to see all applications closed out for the fall semester by the end of August, barring any unforeseen special circumstances, just so the students have plenty of time to work through those courses and make sure they're on track to complete them by the end of the semester. So again, we're looking at roughly 100 to 130 when it's all said and done. Some are are accepted and they've done advising, and now we're waiting to see kind of what their next step is and making sure they log in that first day and that they're marked in attendance that first day. I'll bring you more next week after we have our first day of school virtually, and we get an update on how those first few days went and the actual participation rates that we're seeing. Just again, making sure that whoever's accepted, that they're able to navigate the system and have the support that they need to be successful and complete the year on a very positive note. Any questions that I can answer for you? It's been a great team of people working around the clock to make sure this was able to launch for the students and for the families, and it's been a joy to get to meet the kids and know that for many of them, this is the exact right fit that they need. So thrilled that we're able to offer this opportunity to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can give you feedback. I've run
Yes.
into several parents who attended the orientation, and they said it was incredibly organized, and they feel more than prepared. So congratulations to you and your team for a great effort.
Thank you.
Well, as somebody who doesn't come down here every day, come down here quite a bit.
Yes, you do.
Every time I came in recent, I mean, at least the last month, maybe longer, there was conversations about this happening and planning and preparation. I know it was a great deal of work. I'm just thankful y'all took that time. I know it was meaningful, and I'm glad to hear things are off on the right track.
We have an amazing team, from those that did assessments to those that onboarded, all around. They were all in, and again, as they met those families, it was the right thing for these families. The parents picked wisely for their children. Thank you.
I had a parent stop me at the pep rally and thanked us for this opportunity for their kid. So it was really nice to, have that parent, walk up and thank us for that. So it was great. Good
Thank
job.
you.
You're staying
I am.
for 8C. 8C, Assessment and Accountability Update, Dr. Barbara Ibarra.
Thank you, sir. Continuing on our path this evening, as you well know, the state assessment always happens in the spring semester. That transpired again this spring. In mid-June, parents received an email communication from the district letting them know that their students' assessment results on STAR or EOC were available to them. And again, you go into the Skyward app and they're able to click on a link and it takes them directly into that TEA portal where they can access their students' results. When parents receive their results, they receive a couple of different bits of information. One is about the student's achievement or performance level. And as the board is well aware, students are rated by the state of Texas on approaching grade level, meeting grade level, and mastering grade level. So those three designations are about the student's achievement level. But there's also another measure, a metric about the student growth. Did the student make adequate growth from last year to this year based on how they performed last year? We feel like this is a really critical element. It only transpires in mathematics and in language arts in grades 4 through the high school culminating course. But it does communicate to parents, I might have done better than last year, but did I make a year's worth of growth? And I think that's important for us to look at as we're planning for the future and for the next year. We're going to talk some more about that. We've talked about it in the past as well, but the district is making a very conscientious effort to work with parents and to work with students to understand what their individual growth goals are in terms of their academic performance. In terms of the results from the spring assessments of STAR and EOC, district results were very stable. Very similar to the prior year. There were improvements overall in all 4 core courses in terms of those assessments and in almost every single grade level, but relatively stable nonetheless. So we're expecting very similar results than the prior year. When we talk about these results, and it's always a big media moment now when the results come out, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but you'll see accountability results come out at the end of this week. These assessment results have been with us since the end of May, early June. And so we don't wait for accountability to come out to start looking at this data, and in particular, looking at how do we readjust ourselves, how do we readjust the curriculum, our staffing arrangements, and how do we arrange ourselves to best meet the needs of students. And so you're going to see, and you've been seeing, the fruit of that labor all summer long, from curriculum revisions to reconforming teams at grade levels and making sure we have the right people in the right place to lead a particular grade level team. You'll also see that when we do this, we work very closely, the district staff works very closely with campus administration, because all summer long, we're diving into this data by campus to understand how do we best position the campus where they put their efforts on the items that will get kids the furthest by doing the most work possible to benefit them. So I'm very thankful for our school leadership team and for Dr. Chupp. She's been a staple in terms of focusing on student growth and looking at what is the campus result, and then how do we bring that down to the individual child level. Ultimately, much like in prior years, we look at the individual kid and we say, okay, how did this student perform last year? And then what's a reasonable goal for them in the coming year for this grade and subject? It can't be so outlandish that it's not achievable, but what would be a year's worth of growth? What would get them that measure of moving to the next performance level where they're making adequate progress and then some? Once that's set, all of that data in terms of what we've set the student goal to be is poured into our assessment system, and it's run by the teacher. So you might have one teacher who has a group of students who are all gifted, and you have another teacher whose students are a very diverse mix of performance levels. They're going to have very different goals for their students based on where they were last year and what those achievements are going to be. So instead we focus on what does growth look like for that teacher. And if I'm getting the percent of students hitting their growth targets, then I know I'm making adequate progress to the needs of the students and making sure that just because the student can master the content doesn't mean they've made growth. They haven't made a year's worth of growth. And so we have to look very specifically at kids and teachers and knowing that growth in this classroom is going to look highly differently than growth in this next door classroom. So that those goals are reasonable for the teacher as well as the student, and then ultimately pour into the campus outcome of a B or better, right? That's the whole here is how do we get kids to growth? Because if you get to growth, you get to those achievement outcomes that we're looking for. Speaking of achievement, this is the final year of the STAR assessment. So this is the last year you will have us, I guess this time next year will be the last year that we report on the results of the STAR and the EOC. This is the finale, so to speak. If you look back over the timeline on the side of the slide, from 2017 to 2022, we were on STAR 1.0 with A through F. 1.0. Then we transitioned into the new version of STAR with the technology enhanced items, writing across all subject areas. And then we also looked at a new accountability system where it's based on a number of different things, but similarly structured. And remember the commissioner said you could do better, but get a lower grade, all of those. Well, now we're transitioning into a new phase. So after this year, we will transition to the student success tool. SST will be the new state assessment. It will begin with the 27-28 school year. All of that transpired under House Bill 8. It will have through the year assessments for students in grades 3 through 8, and the option to do through the year assessments at the high school level. So you'll have a beginning of the year, a middle of the year, and an end of the year. There will be much shorter assessments for beginning of the year and middle of the year. But the end of the year assessment will be comparable to what we conceive as the STAR assessment right now. They're also changing the time frame by which those assessments are taken. More of that's coming out. They are discontinuing the English 2 assessment. So the English 2 EOC, this is the final year for it. Any students who are cohort 2026 who just walk the stage, and then the current seniors are still required to pass the English 2 EOC for graduation and commencement. Future cohorts are no longer required to pass that assessment. So let's just put a pin in that for a second. When you think about it, the students who will take the English 2 this year are not required to pass it to graduate. I think that's worthy of note. And I think that could be a problem statewide for a number of school systems. So at any rate, that's how it's being proposed right now. We will hear more as it's released, but this will be a fundamental change to state assessments for students. There are some good things coming with it. The beginning of the year and the middle of the year testing for grades 3 through 8 is more dynamic, where it responds based on how the student answered the last question. And it modifies to how the student performed, kind of like the MAP assessment does. But the end of the year assessment is criterion based only, and it is a same test for everybody. So middle of the year and beginning of the year are dynamic. The other one is static. So there's going to be a little bit of confusion as we communicate to families how to use that data. And even for administrators and for teachers, how do I know what portions of the curriculum the student has truly mastered to the level the state expects if the test is dynamic? And so there's just going to be some things that we have to work through and do a little differently. Ultimately, it's an overhaul of the entire system, and we're on board for it. But we're going to cautiously move forward with it. And looking ahead to the rest of this week, we already know the first day of school is this Wednesday. We're excited to greet all of our students and our families. On Friday, August 14th, you will see those accountability ratings go public across the state of Texas. Just like us, everybody else's will be up there as well. And then we'll be back together again to share additional data in the coming weeks and months about that assessment data. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
I have a quick one.
Yes, ma'am.
Go back to the last slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the English 2, what is their reasoning for that not having any kind of accountability?
I think they were on a little bit of a struggle with, they're still administering it, but they can't retest any longer. So after this year, after this coming year, 27, 28, when this is the last year for it, the subsequent year, if you didn't pass it and it's required for graduation, you wouldn't be able to retest it. And so how long do you wait for it to phase out? Your point is well taken. Why not phase it out sooner rather than later if it's no longer going to be required? Especially given there are a number of other assessments, ACT, SAT, that also play into our accountability system for those who've taken EOCs earlier. That could obviously be a substitute assessment.
Okay, when you find out,
Yes, ma'am.
would you let me know?
If we get that answer, I will tell
I
you.
won't get any sleep until I find that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 9, consent agenda. The board can remove any item from the consent agenda if applicable. If there are none, I will entertain a motion.
I got a question. I saw on here we selected a pizza vendor. How might one get on that selection? Just saying.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's
It's clearly the most popular lunch, and that's why Sandra.
trying to figure out a way to get on that
tonight,
committee.
Eagerly awaiting, it's probably first day of school lunch, I don't know, but it's the most requested for sure. We'll put you on the taste.
Yeah, I was about to say taste testing.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
this
in
is an unpaid
Yeah.
gig. I figured get some pizza out of it.
I'll go with you.
She does have you do bring over ambassadors, I guess it is once a year maybe, and they do a test take, so we'll definitely include you in that testing.
Don't forget me down here. I'll do it too.
Okay, so we'll take 2. We can't have
You
more
got
than
the-
3.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
we got
I'm
2.
coming. You said
Okay,
Tim wasn't coming.
so Tim, Felicia, and David, is
Yeah.
that what it is? Okay, we got 3, we'll include you.
So I
And
move
so-
approval of all the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Waller, seconded by Mrs. Benford. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes.
You don't want pizza. You want.
Before we move on to the next item, I just want to point out E3's here for just a consent item, something that really doesn't even have any questions, and I appreciate their partnership very much. They're truly, we've mentioned them, you've met them, they're a wonderful organization, company, and the 2 gentlemen in the back are just really great partners of Bryan ISD. We're very, very thankful, and that you just approved it, they're moving through, but they came just to make sure if you had any questions that they would be here to answer them. So I appreciate them coming from all over parts of Texas to make sure that they're here. So I just wanted to point that out before they head out. So
Oh, I thought they were saying all the way down to 9F or 9E. Yeah,
So we got a
Those are consent.
thank you, though.
Okay. Yeah, thank y'all.
Let me catch up.
You're good.
So we'll move to item number 10A, action item to consider approval of purchase of over $50,000 for armed security guards. Deputy Superintendent
All
Dr.
right, I've got Rich Himmel here, our Assistant Director of Safety and Security, and we just wanted to go through sort of this process and what it talked about and what it led to. And so we sent out a request for proposals for our armed security guards to over 222 vendors, and we received 14 different responses for level 15, for 15 level 3 security guards. I apologize, there's a lot of numbers in there. The proposed agreement includes 15 dedicated training days along with funding for necessary training materials. And so on June 27th, we posted the bid. On the 14th of July, we opened the bids. And we put a 7-member team evaluation of not only district personnel, but campus personnel, principals, to review those bids and to look at them and evaluate them. We did conduct a thorough reference check. And then obviously we're here tonight for a recommendation. And that process, Rich is happy to talk about it if you would like. But, you know, we obviously had a vendor, and when we opened it up, as in any case, I think it's great when you look for competition. When you make sure what you have is the absolute best, you're able to compare it, and you not only take into consideration all of the training and their past performance, and then with reference checks, the performances of other companies, you get to a recommendation. And so Rich is here to answer any questions. Through that process, we did come away with one. It was Jet Security at a total cost of $697,032. They are currently working in other districts, Northwest ISD, Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth. And so, again, Rich is here to answer any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions, but our recommendation is for Jet Security.
I move approval of the contract with Jet Security in the amount of $697,032 for the 2006-2007 school year as presented.
Motion was made by Mrs. Waller, seconded by Ms. Benford. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes. Is that the last?
We have one about Bryan PD.
Or is, oh, here it is.
Yeah.
10B, to discuss and consider approval of school resource unit interlocal agreement between Bryan ISD and City of Bryan. Dr. Brian Merrill and Assistant Director of Safety and Security, Mr. Rich Himmel.
Again, we're happy to answer any questions. We greatly value our relationship with Bryan PD. And again, we're, for our secondary campuses, 2 SROs, 1 sergeant that oversees the division, 2 at Bryan High School, 2 at Rudder High School, 1 at Davila, 1 at Stephen F. Austin, 1 at MC Harris and DAEP, a rover that is assigned to Jane Long, and then a rover that is assigned to Rayburn Intermediate Schools for a total of 10 officers. And there's the total contract amount, $1,113,282. Again, we are incredibly thankful for Bryan PD and their support of the district. We not only are SROs, but we use other officers, for example, at the event that we had on Friday for our community pep rally. So they're very supportive, and we are very thankful for that unit.
So Brian, what do the rovers,
Mhm.
where do they go? They just
So-
come in and check out?
No, ma'am, they're traditionally at Jane Long or Rayburn, but I'd let Rich answer that question more specifically. But yeah, they are assigned to those campuses.
Yes, they're also available to transport arrests to the jail and to go to other campuses where they're needed to help out other officers.
So there's an increase of $44,517 from last year. Is that just price just went up, or?
To some degree, the price did go up. It also is, the city was paying for Friday nights, And so all of the officers that you see at our games on Friday nights were paid for by the city, and they have transferred those costs over to us. So that is the bulk of, the majority of those costs was that Friday night, because we have, I think it's 10, 11 officers, something like that, 9.
Between 8 and 12.
8 and 12, yeah. So, and it just adds up over time for the Friday nights.
Was it specific to Friday night? I mean,
Well, or Thursday or whatever night we
Okay.
have a game night, yeah.
But I mean,
So the
I-
varsity games, yes, sir.
so I guess my question is, it's more so of them not covering the cost of police presence.
Yes, sir.
at football games.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And I think their stance in the past was, that's where a lot of the community is, and so the officers should be there because we have thousands of people there from the city. And, but nonetheless, it's our event, and so because of that, they're asking us to pick up the total for that.
So those are the officers that are at the game. These are these resource officers. Are those the main ones?
Could be, but not necessarily. It will be Bryan PD officers, but it may not be the SROs.
How many we have at the game? 11?
8 to 12. 8 and 12.
They have to direct traffic. We can't use private security for directing traffic, for example. And we don't want outside police agencies to be directing traffic. They may not be too familiar with the city.
Is this a annual increase every year, or is this just a one-time?
So I would anticipate that being there in years to come. They didn't say they would pick this back up. And then I think it would either be an increase maybe to a vehicle that they had to purchase, or just inflation would be any increases. But there's not anything else that, well, they're a portion of the city is paying for, but they could, yeah. So do you want to talk about that?
Well, yes, under this interlocal agreement, we pay 75% of the cost. The city pays 25%, and that's common
Yes.
with districts that use this type of arrangement.
Thank you.
And who decides, determines where they go? Let me just speak frank. I understand we have to have police presence there. I'm okay with that, but I think we need to shift some down to the kids section, maybe, to have some
Where they go-
supervision down there and not
During
everybody at the one section, spread them around a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. We could certainly have an input on that.
Oh, that would be great. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Oh, awesome.
What is the state's contribution to this?
For safety and security, it's upside down. When you think about the allocation, I think it's roughly $1 million, a little over. I don't remember. Norma, will you look in some of those slide decks and find the exact total? We've presented a ton of times. I just don't
Yeah.
remember. It's at a negative contribution.
Right.
And transportation is too. We've consistently used that as an example. And don't quote me on the numbers, but for example, transportation is 8 million total that it takes to run the buses, to do everything, and I think it's 1.5 we receive. And safety and security is very similar. It's at a negative $1 to $2 million, and we'll find that number here shortly. I apologize for not knowing.
No, I know that was a difficult question to ask off. I think this is another example of a requirement by the state to staff our schools with police officers and SROs. And personally, I'm thankful that they're there. I value their presence
Absolutely.
and the work that they're doing. But it does come with a cost that is not passed to the district to cover those requirements. And so I am thankful that the city of Bryan continues to work with us to help us cover these expenses.
Yes,
And just appreciate their partnership and continued partnership in the future.
Yeah, Norma, just being able to find the numbers so quickly. The cost is 3.4, and we received 1.1, so it's at a negative 2.3. So, and transportation similar, just at a bigger number, $6.5 million. So unfunded mandates, and it's exactly what you're talking about. They require certain things, and for that to be in place, it just costs $3.4 million. And there's really, we've done our best. You just approved a contract, and we saved money on this contract compared to the others, but that was handed down by the state, and you had zero time the last time this kind of happened for us to be able to find vendors. This time, we went back out, and we looked at all options and checked references and found one that was actually cheaper. And, we'll constantly do that to evaluate it. We do that for all contracts and you help us do that. And so this one is, we're thankful they pay 25%, very much so, but that still doesn't get us, we're still 2.4 upside down.
Yeah, we're definitely thankful for the help, and if anybody's still wondering if we really need the 2 golden pennies, you should consider that as well.
Yep.
We just talked about.
Those wouldn't even cover they wouldn't cover the difference between this and
Yeah, I know.
transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I move approval of the resolution authorizing the district to enter into the interlocal cooperation agreement with the city of Bryan pertaining to the provision of school resource officers as presented.
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Waller, seconded by Mr. Pavlis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. The board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.0821. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in a closed session will occur after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. The time is now 8:20.
got called by the hospital.
Maybe tonight or something?
The board reconvened in open session, what time is it? At 9:50? No, sorry, 9:43. No action was taken in closed session. There being no further business, the meeting adjourned at 9:43.